Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joanne Becerra. I'm the Director of the Green Communities Program. Thank you for joining our webinar. We still have a few more participants joining, but I'll get the introductions and so forth underway right now to allow time for questions and answers. You are at the Climate Leader Community Roadmap Assistance webinar. Hopefully you're in the right place. This webinar is being recorded, and we intend to post the recording as well as the slides only on our website within a few days. So I know that's often a common question we get. And what we're going to talk about today, hang on. There we go. This is why we practice. Going to provide a brief overview of the Climate Leader Community Program. I think a lot of you that have registered for this webinar are somewhat familiar with it. You might have seen a previous presentation or came across some information on the website. We will be going over briefly the overall program, but really want to focus this afternoon on the Decarbonization Roadmap Assistance grant that we're offering, as well as a little bit about what we're calling the roadmaps. And for the purposes of this webinar, please type in your questions in the Q&A function. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and whatever we aren't able to answer verbally, we will get written responses, and we will post all the questions and answers as part of the Combis filing. As you are aware, the grants are always on Combis, and that's the formal document. So we will post the formal Q&A there, and there'll also be an additional opportunity to have questions addressed in the Combis Q&A function. Okay. A little bit of review. Everybody who's familiar with the Green Communities Program is well aware that we were established in 2008 by the Green Communities Act, really focusing on energy efficiency for municipal facilities. And it established the 5 criteria that green communities have adopted over time. The good news is we're a pretty green state. We have 291 green communities. We will be announcing soon our newest addition to the family. But as you can see, almost 90% of the state's population lives in a green community. Since 2010, when we awarded the first green community designations, we've awarded over $177 million in grants that leveraged $41 million of mass save incentives. And most importantly, reduced emissions and saved energy costs for cities and towns. But as we all know, 2008 seems like a long time ago when we think about clean energy and climate initiatives and goals. And since then, a lot of cities and towns have been doing more or would like to do more. So what we are doing with this Climate Leader Community Program is really building upon the success of the Green Communities Program, which many of you have been a part of for all these years, and better aligning our resources with state goals and energy goals and climate goals, and provide a framework for cities and towns to expand opportunities. So those 5 criteria are listed on the left-hand side here. And for the Climate Leader Program, again, on the right-hand side, these are the requirements. And I want to focus in on these last 3 here that are really building on existing green communities criteria. In particular, the decarbonization roadmap for municipal operations, which is what we're going to talk mostly about this afternoon. Zero emission vehicle first policy, and then the specialized code adoption. So those are extensions of existing green communities criteria. What's going to be different with the Climate Leader Community Program is there's going to be a recertification process. So those of you who have been green communities for a long time are well aware that you become designated a green community, and you're a green community until you're not, whether you end up not meeting the 5 criteria anymore. With climate leaders, we really want to grow with the cities and towns and encourage them to expand and offer opportunities. And in particular, for this first recertification process, we're requiring that communities participate or sponsor a community engagement best practice. In particular, with all the federal funds that are starting to trickle in to help with residential and small commercial, clean energy, and weatherization. We really want to capitalize on those opportunities and make sure we're all working together. So that's how the climate leader communities are going to be different. And I feel like I might be preaching to the choir here, but I think cities and towns are really interested in demonstrating best practices. Many cities and towns have local sustainability or net zero goals. So the idea is this program will help support you in achieving those goals by providing tools and resources, and of course, funding to implement some of these things. So speaking of funding, these are some straw proposals that we've been floating for the past several months. We've been talking about these as enhanced grants because they're sort of above and beyond what Green Communities currently funds. But until we have a grant budget and grant program fully approved, we're still going to speak to them as enhanced grants. Suffice it to say, we are very interested in supporting clean energy at the municipal level, decarbonizing as much as possible. And one thing that we're probably going to do with these grants is have two separate funding categories. Utilizing the current competitive grant application, which most of you are well aware of, and we have an established review and evaluation process. Communities would be able to continue to fund efficiency projects and capacity building, community engagement type things that are non-capital intensive per se. In addition to that, we will launch a Climate Leader Accelerated Grant, really focusing on building decarbonization, on-site solar storage, and support for geothermal. And that's something that we will likely roll out this summer. And it'll be bigger and better. But that's all I can say right now. So enough about grants. Let's talk about municipal decarbonization and roadmaps. What the criteria or requirement says is creating a decarbonization roadmap with 2030 and 2050 goals. And it builds upon the Clean Energy and Climate Plan that our office or EEA has put out. I guess it's back in 2022 now, that establishes emissions reductions of 50% over 1990 levels for 2030 and 75% reduction for 2040, and then in net zero essentially in 2050. This is, I love this graphic because it really talks about the different ways in which cities and towns and as well as residents interact with energy and how we can do our part to reduce emissions over time. For this decarbonization roadmap, we're talking about municipal operations only. This is not a community-wide climate action plan. This is, using the Green Communities Energy Reduction Plan as an analogy. This is taking it one step further to really look at ultimately reducing the use of on-site fossil fuels. So in terms of what we want cities and towns to consider for existing buildings, really looking at reducing the use of fossil fuels or eliminating it as much as possible. Really incorporating building envelope upgrades, weatherization as much as possible. Driving down the energy use intensity or EUI of your building, or what I always like to call the miles per gallon part of your building. And where possible, install renewables for on-site generation and some resiliency. And then, of course, for new construction, all of you will be part of the specialized building code. So a lot of that's going to be baked in. but really striving for net zero as much as possible. And again, on-site renewables where possible. So how we're approaching this is what we like to call zero over time. This is something that I've come across through the Rocky Mountain Institute, put together a guidebook mostly for commercial property managers, but a lot of municipalities, that's kind of what you are in a way, as a property manager or facilities manager. But looking at triggering events when equipment is aging out, when you're renovating the building anyway or having an addition. When the roof needs to be replaced, that's often a great opportunity to do some important work. And of course, building replacement. We put together this handy triggering event worksheet that you may choose to use or not, but it's a nice visual way to look at your building portfolio, looking at regular building checkups. That could be retro commissioning or just making sure the building controls are where they should be. Identifying dates when major equipment needs to be replaced. Identifying dates when new construction is coming down the pike. Just, again, this is something on our website now that you can start to play around with, looking at your building portfolios and identifying visually where things are going. So again, a little bit more detail on the roadmap. What we're focusing on is really eliminating the use of on-site fossil fuels. So that first line in this chart is looking at emissions reductions from on-site fossil fuels. And what's different about the Climate Leader roadmap from the energy reduction plan is right now, everybody's going to have a baseline year of 2022. That's your emissions baseline. So measuring, these are the targets that we'd like people to meet. And again, these are targets. They're not etched in stone. They're not laws. They're not statutes. They're not regulations. But to help with the planning purposes to get to that 100% by 2050, there's incremental steps along the way. So that first line, again, is looking at on-site fossil fuels. The second line is looking at the percentage of vehicles that are in your fleet. So by 2027, light-duty passenger vehicles, we are hoping that communities can plan for 5% of their fleet be zero-emission vehicles. And then by 2030, 20% of the fleet, and so on. And similarly, for the medium and heavy-duty vehicles, similar progression. Obviously, the market is still developing, so we don't anticipate many to be part of your fleets. But as you can see, there's incremental progress to get to 2050. And then that last line, or the second to the last line, is talking about the energy use intensity. So these are your existing buildings. They're going to be part of your portfolios for some time. Really looking at enhancing efficiency, taking another look at weatherization or insulation, making sure your building controls are up to snuff. So at the end of the day, that bottom line in bold is we're looking at emission reduction goals over 2022. And again, these are targets. So going to the planning assistance grants that dropped off last week, we are hoping to provide assistance to cities and towns who need help to put together this roadmap. The first option or task or option is a desktop analysis. And I anticipate that most communities, this is what they will need, is the beauty of you being a green community and working with Mass Energy Insight is that your Mass Energy Insight accounts are pretty up to date. Hopefully you have all your square footage in there and you have a handle on your building characteristics in terms of what kind of equipment, the age of the equipment, how it's operating, etc. Option number 2 is for those communities that don't have that. They need some help with some on-site assessments. So if you need help with somebody walking through your buildings and helping to assess conditions and so forth. And most importantly, with the roadmaps, we go into the guts of the guidance requirements, the guidance document on our website. We talk about 75% of the community's total building emissions must be included in this roadmap, but all school buildings must be included. So if you include all your school buildings, your town hall, your library, public safety, and you're at 85%, then that's what it is. What we don't need or want necessarily is analysis or plans for things that are like pump stations or the transfer station or unheated storage, things like that. We really just want to focus on, good sized buildings and what's in your community's portfolio. So how this is going to work, this is a little different than typical, meta grants or green community grants, is that we will get applications from communities interested in this assistance, and we will assign you to a consultant. We put out an RFP a couple months ago, and we are engaging with 2 consultants. We're still working on contracting with them right now, but you'll be assigned to a consultant, and most likely, again, given the amount of interest we get, a number of applications, we'll most likely do this in 2 phases for this year. And those communities that are most likely, almost there to become a climate leader will most likely be in the first phase. We will have 2 opportunities for communities to apply for climate leader certification this year. Once will be in July and then again at the end of the year. So the goal is anybody who gets this assistance in 2024 and meets all the other requirements should be able to, apply to be a climate leader. So we assign you to a consultant. The consultants will reach out and schedule a meeting. We say within 30 days. Hopefully it's earlier than that, but that's what's in the contracts and so forth. And then after that meeting, or during that meeting, or even before, if possible, the consultants will review any information you have. Key information would be capital improvement plans that your community may have, facility master plans, things like that. Anything that will help the consultants identify those triggering events as we go along. And the goal is to have a roadmap completed within 90 days. To apply for this planning assistance, again, this is outlined in the program opportunity notice, but we want a letter of commitment that from the community that within 1 year of receiving this award, this community will apply to become a climate leader community. We also want communities to already have established an energy committee or a partnership with a community-based organization to, again, act as advisors and to facilitate this process. And then, and again, to have gathered pertinent information on most of their facilities. And what we're asking communities to include is with their application is a screenshot of this report from Mass Energy Insight. This is something that many of you probably never even stumbled across, but it's got a, basically identifies the square footage of the buildings. So this indicates to the review team that the community has, fully populated its Mass Energy Insight accounts. And it also includes the energy use for these buildings. That's all we need, is just a screenshot that includes all this. In addition, as part of the application, we want you to identify how far the community is in becoming a climate leader community. So everybody hopefully is a green community in good standing and has submitted its annual report from last year. Has the, again, local advisory body. And then these are like check marks. Does the community have a decarbonization commitment? Some do, some don't. That's okay, but just let us know how far you are. And if you do have one, either send it to us, or if it's part of a climate action plan, include a link to that. Has the community adopted a zero emission vehicle policy? Again, if you have, please send it in. And again, if the community has adopted this opt-in specialized code. So again, to have this assistance done on a timely manner, the community is really a partner with the consultant. The consultant isn't going to just take your information and go away. It's going to be, a fairly iterative process, because they really need to know, what the plans are for your facilities, how the buildings are being used and so forth. So whereas this type of information, we don't ask you to provide this as part of your application. This is something that we want communities to prepare for, because this is really important to, again, identifying those triggering events and where the community is going with their buildings. So this is the Climate Leader Program timeline at this point. We've got the Roadmap Planning Assistance application out. The deadline is April 12th. Our team will continue to support specialized code votes as we go through Springtown meeting season. Swampscott was the most recent vote, I believe. I think that was on Monday night. So up to 33 specialized code communities. And I'm aware of, at least another dozen or so votes that will be happening. Our PRAC Mass Energy Insight team will continue to update and improve Mass Energy Insight. And let me just stop there and put in a plug for Mass Energy Insight. We will be using Mass Energy Insight for the Climate Leader certification application program this year. So similar to the annual report process, where questions were answered and things were uploaded into Mass Energy Insight, we're going to be doing that with the Climate Leader program. So we're very excited to have those enhancements put into place. Additionally, I should have said this at the outset, similar to the energy reduction plan, communities don't necessarily need this planning assistance to create the roadmap. There are no audits involved. There are no energy assessments. There are no engineering involved. A non-technical term that I've been using is smushing your capital improvement plans, your facilities plans, along with the energy use and with decarbonization in mind. So in 5 years, if the boiler at the police station will be aging out, you can plan for that and say, oh, we need to replace that in 5 years. Perhaps in 3 years back, we should look at the electric service. Do we need to upgrade the panel? What do we need to do to bring in heat pumps to this building? Do we need to do some additional weatherization? What kind of engineering do we need to do? What kind of specifications do we need to develop? So when the community is ready to replace that boiler, there's a plan in place. That's all it is. It's a plan. So Mass Energy Insight is developing emissions reductions forecasting. So taking our hypothetical police station, we should be able to put in some information about the heating system that's there, what you plan on doing with heat pumps or things like that, and be able to forecast the emissions reduction. And that should be functional later this spring. So if you end up not being in the first phase of the planning assistance queue, if you will, you can start working on this now. It's not something that you need to have. This is a planning document. It's a roadmap. It's not an engineering study. Okay, there's my Mass Energy Insight commercial. So as I mentioned, our Climate Leader certification applications will be due towards the end of July and then at the end of the year. And we hope to announce the first group of climate leaders at our first ever Green Community Summit in October. So we're very excited about that. And then this summer and fall, we will also issue our Climate Leader Grant Program Opportunity Notice. And of course, you know these friendly faces. These are your regional coordinators who have been our ambassadors for this program. And I know a number of you have already been in discussions with them and meeting with them. So continue to work with them with any questions and concerns, and have them come talk to your meetings and so forth. And with that, I'm done with my presentation and happy to entertain some questions. So Mark's going to read them out to me.
Hi, everyone. So the first question is, it's from Bob Higgins-Steele, and can our municipality use the trigger event worksheet as a template for our municipal decarbonization roadmap?
Well, that's a good question, Rob. So it's not necessarily a template. It depends how you define template. If you look at our guidance, the decarbonization roadmap is more of a document that is similar to the energy reduction plan, in that we talk about goals and initiatives and so forth. But certainly the triggering event worksheet can be used as part of that. And it's a nice single page overview to identify those triggering events and interventions, if you will. But it's not going to be the only part of the decarbonization roadmap, but it's a tool that communities can use.
So the next question is, are vehicles included in the roadmap or only buildings?
Great question. So vehicles are included in the roadmap, in that we're reducing the use of on-site fossil fuels. And if I can go back to my friendly little chart here. It's part of the roadmap, in that we want to see some fleet transformation. Part of the roadmap, and again, it's sort of the roadmap itself is going to focus on buildings, but vehicles will need to be included in the overall program. It's part of the text, if you will, of that report that I mentioned. And then, of course, the zero emission vehicle first policy will also help drive some of this.
So just to be clear, the zero emissions vehicle policy will drive that, but the vehicles themselves and like a fleet overview will need to be included in the roadmap.
Yes, not vehicle by vehicle per se, but just, how's the community going to address their vehicles? Have you started fleet transformation already? What are the plans for on-site charging, if any? That type of thing. Yeah.
So next one's from William Lake. Will DOER put out a model zero emissions vehicle policy resolution?
We should have one on our website already. If you navigate to our Climate Leader community part of our website, which is a little hidden, to be honest, right now. We're working on having it become front and center. But if you can't find it, reach out to your regional coordinator. We have model language. Yes.
Next question is, will the slides and recording be available on DOER's website soon? And the answer to that is yes, we will.
Yeah.
Next question from Tom Birmingham. Please explain the relationship, if any, between the Climate Leaders program and a given municipal electricity aggregation program. From a municipal perspective, it would be great to align these two programs in an effort to quantify total reductions in both energy use and greenhouse gas emissions.
Oh, that's a great question. So the short answer is yes, it's aligned. What I did not talk about in this particular presentation is Climate Leader best practices. We have curated a list of a variety of best practices that we want Climate Leader communities to engage in, and that they should engage in. And one of them is community clean energy aggregation with a 100% renewable option. So that is part of it. There's a lot of other best practices that are included in that. And you're right, it's all linked. But the focus of this particular presentation is focusing in on the roadmap and the planning assistance involved and the initial certification requirements.
Next question is, if all of these goals and roadmaps apply to municipal structures and vehicles only, what will be the plan for including individual residences so that net zero in 2050 can be achieved?
Great question. So again, another best practice is for communities to develop climate action plans or municipal or net zero plans, depending on what you want to call them, to engage with all parts of the community. And again, that's something that the Climate Leader grants will help support.
Next question from Fritzy. Might replacing windows become incentivized as part of this program?
Replacing windows. It might. It's a broad question, so I'm not going to say, yes, we will replace all windows. I think we'll, look at supporting window replacement. We know that there's a lot of really crummy windows out there that are really expensive to replace. So that's something we will consider.
Next question, are schools required to be part of the decarbonization roadmap if the town is part of a regional school district and the schools haven't been included in the Green Communities Energy Reduction Plan or annual report?
Good question. So the answer is no. We are, again, trying to mirror the community's energy reduction plan building portfolio or baseline with the decarbonization roadmap. So if none of the regional schools are part of the baseline, then no, they do not need to be included.
Next question is, it's from, let's see, sorry. How do we meet these goals when we can't get our utility to allow more solar, or also when asked about a geothermal network, we're told there's no plans? We have a solar plan and decarbonization plan, but we can't move forward.
This particular program is really looking at eliminating on-site fossil fuels. We understand the constraints with some parts of the state related to increased solar installations, and hopefully as the electric sector modernization plans get developed and implemented, that'll ease those pinch points a bit. So, where we look at it is what can the communities control right now, and it's looking at on-site fossil fuels at this point.
Could you please again reiterate the steps of getting a Climate Leader designation? I understand that technical assistance application is the first step, and is it a requirement? And can a municipality apply for designation without the technical assistance?
Yes, please. If you look on the right-hand side, hopefully I changed my slides correctly. Right-hand side, this is a brief summary of the Climate Leader requirements. You have a local committee of some sort to advise the community. The community has a decarbonization commitment. You create the roadmap that if you don't need assistance for, that's great. Because I know over the years, a number of communities have had help with creating a municipal net zero plan or created it on their own. So if you don't need our planning assistance, let's leave it for those who do. Adopt the zero emission vehicle first policy, and then adopting the specialized energy code. So those are the requirements to become a Climate Leader.
Question. What documentation is required when a community makes a decision to purchase a vehicle to comply with the zero emission vehicle policy? Is there substantial additional paperwork?
No. No. You just purchase the vehicle, you have the policy in place. and you purchase a vehicle that adheres to the policy. There's no additional paperwork involved.
And we'll continue to track your vehicle through Mass Energy Insight, which we do right now. We track the municipality's vehicle purchases through there.
Correct.
So Kate Jenkins Sullivan asks, is this program available after this year?
The planning assistance, yes. So we intend to offer this every year. Since this is the first year of this program, I don't want to say the first group will be guinea pigs, but we suspect we will need to make some tweaks, unintended consequences to things or issues that come up that we may not have realized. But the intent is to offer the planning assistance at least for another year. So if you don't get it in this year, fear not. It'll be available next year and possibly the year after.
Next question, will you send all registrants a link to the slideshow when it's posted?
Sure, we can do that.
From Julie Wilson Martin, can you share more information about the Climate Leaders application process? Is it a rolling application process that opens in late July? Will there be a deadline to apply to be part of the first class of the program?
Yes, Jillian. I kind of talked quickly over this. Let me pull up the. There we go. We will have a deadline. We've tried to do rolling applications with green communities, and people need deadlines. That was our finding out of that. So the first deadline is going to be July 25th for the first group, and then December 31st for the second group.
Next question. We have a building which already has a major reduction of energy intensity before 2022. Will this be considered when looking at climate leader targets?
Not sure. Again, this is looking at the building portfolio as a whole. So if the building's already efficient, that's great. Again, the targets are suggested targets. This is a little different than the energy reduction plan where, there was that 20% benchmark. This one is targets. We're not, to go a little bit further, there's no building stock change. There's nothing. It's just what's in the community's portfolio. So that's not something we considered, but again, we can take a look at it. But those percentages were really suggested targets and not mandates, or if you don't meet them, we kick you out. They're just helping communities, along the way for planning, because it's easier to plan incrementally than go from 0 to 60 and it's 2045 and nothing's happened. So we're trying to, have those incremental goals.
Next question. Could you post a link to the website here? I think I can do that for the guidelines. And also, our community is about 50% of the way finished with our first climate action plan, and we'll be working to align it with the to fit the roadmap requirement. But we utilized the greenhouse gas emissions baseline of 2017. Would our climate action plan still be eligible for consideration as a roadmap if not using 2022 as the baseline?
Let's see, there's several questions in there. So we will be measuring from 2022. That's why we set the baseline for everyone to be that. So ideally the roadmap would adhere to that. But that's something we can take a look at. But I think in terms of getting everybody moving in the same direction. Like where you start doesn't necessarily matter, but if from a program measurement perspective, if we have everybody with the same baseline, it helps us track the results easier than if we have multiple baselines, which is what we have now with green communities, and reporting on results has always been a bear with, 10 different baseline years.
Next question is, what is the assumption for community engagement under the initial certification? Is that where the community partner group comes into play? We don't have dedicated staff that would be able to help with that effort.
Right. So the community engagement piece can be a variety of things. It can be working with, I know, for instance, Mass Save works on the community first partnerships. So that's something that the community can apply for, or if it's already participating in that, extend that program. It can be as simple as, actually, it's not that simple, but doing a municipal aggregation that includes the 100% green option. It could include having an energy fair, a local event that is publicized by the community. We have a curated list, and there's more options. And the idea is something that trying to build upon programs that already exist. So, for instance, with the Empower grant or program that is run through Mass CEC, they work with communities to do some capacity building and so forth. So the idea is that we would help fund these programs if there's no funding available. And one of the funding opportunities when you become a climate leader is funding for staff. We call it seed money because we can't fund staff indefinitely, but it will provide funding for somebody to help do some of this work if the community chose to do so.
All right, next question is, will the state provide any guidance on what a climate action plan should include?
No, not at this point, because again, this is not a climate action plan. This is a roadmap, and I think we're working right now on creating a prototype, because I know communities like to have templates and look to see what other communities have done, but since we don't really have one yet, we're working on putting together a prototype. Climate action plan is usually community-wide and includes lots of other things besides clean energy. And there is a lot of municipalities have already adopted them, and there's various templates. But DOER at this point does not have any guidance on what to include in a climate action plan.
Next question is, our municipality is voluntarily purchasing extra Massachusetts Class 1 RECs with our electricity supply, and that's above and beyond the RPS, much like green aggregations. So over our entire building stock, that is a significant amount of energy. Will the city or town's voluntary REC purchase count towards climate leaders' greenhouse gas reduction efforts?
The short answer is no. The roadmap is really focusing on reducing the use of on-site fossil fuel. We don't want to, we had a discussion early on about, do we include RECs and how do we account for renewables? To keep it simple and to keep the goals of really driving down the use of fossil fuels, that's what we're going to focus on. If the community is voluntarily doing that, that is terrific, and we encourage communities to do that. But in terms of this decarbonization roadmap, we're really focusing on on-site fossil fuel reduction and ultimate elimination by 2050, or at least as much as possible.
Not sure about this next question. It's what energy inspection is required for municipal buildings when they don't get HERS inspections? So we're not Now that would be for a new building, but we're not doing the inspection of these buildings. So I'm, John, if you want to clarify your Maggie, is it okay to exclude a school from the decarbonization roadmap if it is going to be torn down and replaced in a few years?
That's part of the roadmap. So it's a new building. So again, we're not asking any energy analysis or audits or engineering. It's part of your portfolio in 2022, and then they'll say, you know, the school is going to be replaced in, you know, year 3 or whatever, and it's going to, you know, the school that is going to be built will have a low EUI or be net zero or whatever. It's certainly part of the roadmap.
Clarification question about the pond. Why does the pond for climate leaders communities or roadmap assistance prioritize municipalities who have met 4 of the CLC requirements, while those who have met 5 are not, especially if the remaining requirement is the roadmap?
Good question. I think the thinking is that the road
5 would be the 5th one would be the roadmap, right? So they wouldn't have met that one.
Right.
Yeah. So if we're not answering that, Jana, please respond again or ask your question again. So next question, do you anticipate that DOER's roadmap assistance will cover all costs, or are there costs that the municipality may still bear in developing a roadmap?
The only costs that municipalities will need to bear is the cost of labor. So this would be the roadmap itself. The consultants aren't going to write the actual roadmap per se. So again, it's similar to the energy reduction plan where they, the community, you know, talks about goals and this and that, but you'll be able to draw heavily on the roadmap. So there's no costs involved, but there might be a little cost in terms of pulling together the documentation and working with the consultants in terms of identifying those triggering events and capital improvement plans and things like that.
Next question is, what can the climate leaders grants be used for? And can you provide some examples? Are there any limitations?
Considering that the grant program hasn't been fully approved in our pipeline, I can't say specifically, but the idea is it'll fund things such as solar and storage, solar canopies, decarbonizing buildings, and we're also looking at supporting new construction as well in terms of helping to do some of the upfront costs and analysis for potential geothermal systems for new buildings. It's going to be really looking at helping communities move forward with really driving down the reduction and elimination of fossil fuels.
Next question, has there been any changes to the MSBA policy towards municipalities that have or have not adopted the specialized stretch code? Are there any estimates as to how much more grant funding might be available for climate leaders? Do you want to take the first question first?
Sure. What the question is referring to, I believe, is the extra points that MSBA will award communities that build new schools to the specialized code standards. And I believe it's either 2 or 3 percentage points. I don't have it in front of me, but it was something like that. So I believe that's a recent policy that the MSBA has made. So I haven't heard of any changes to that. And gosh, what was the second question, Mark?
Are there any estimates as to how much more grant funding might be available for climate leaders? How much bigger will these awards be? This may be helpful to know when going out for a town meeting.
Sure, that's a great question. I don't have direct numbers right now, but what we're talking about is really driving down the cost, like using solar as an example. Supporting communities at X dollars per watt type of solar, whether it's the community ends up owning it or whether it's through a PPA, similar to solar canopies. We're talking, right now, for instance, our highest grant award in the competitive grant is $500,000. So this would be more than that.
Next question is about the grants as well. Will there be greater financial support for decarbonizing historic municipal buildings, which are often extremely expensive and complicated to retrofit?
Without having particulars, the short answer is yes. We're quite aware of the historic building stock of many municipal buildings. One of my favorite things to do is to go to old town halls and old city halls and libraries, and certainly appreciate the challenges involved with that. So the short answer is yes, and we'll certainly help support those buildings, particularly if they're going to be part of the building stock for the foreseeable future. Absolutely. Will we pay for the whole thing? Probably not, but support's the operative word, and help as much as we can.
Is the application deadline to apply for designation the same as outlined on the slide, as in July 25th or December 31st, or is it on a rolling basis? And when will the application be available in MEI?
Great. So I'll answer the second question first. The application is part of Mass Energy Insight, and we're finalizing some of the verbiage and workspaces, but that should be live pretty soon. If you're able to apply, next month, all the better. But the deadline, these are the deadlines right now for this year. So you don't have to wait till the 25th, obviously. Oh, look at that. It says start accepting deadlines. Start accepting deadlines. Right. So we'll start accepting applications this spring, but the deadline will be July 25th and December 31st. I can see why that's confusing.
Next question is, could you please reiterate what types of projects would be eligible for funding once a municipality is certified as a climate leader?
Let me pull up this handy chart. Excuse me. All right. So what we're honing in on is two different types of grants. One of them will be on the competitive application, and these would include the community engagement pieces that some of the folks had asked about, funding for help with outreach programs, engagement, working with tenants, seniors, etc. Anything that's not capital intensive, as well as your bread and butter efficiency grants will still be available through the regular Green Communities grant. The accelerator grant is going to really hone in on full building decarbonization, looking at reducing or eliminate the use of fossil fuels, probably at a larger scale than the current decarbonization grants that we offer. It'll also include I don't know what the right terminology is, but if you need to do some geothermal wells or test borings to see, investigate whether geothermal is a good option for a particular location, that sort of thing. So looking at not just the project itself, but doing the initial studies and analysis and engineering feasibility. Is it possible to employ this technology at this particular site or this particular building? And then if so, help support the installation of that.
The next few questions I'm going to ask are about deadlines. So, what is the April 12th deadline?
April 12th deadline is for this roadmap assistance grant. If you don't need the assistance, pay no attention to it.
All right, next question, from Neil, following up on Gillian's question. If applying for the fall December 31st deadline, can you submit materials at any time between 7/25 and 12/31? And will designation be determined and announced on a rolling basis or after 12/30?
Well, great question. I'm going to say most likely you can apply at any time. If you know, once the Mass Energy Insight Climate Leader application portal is up and running. Given that we like to announce things, we tend to review things in groups, and we'll most likely announce, you know, Climate Leader certifications in groups. So those that apply at the end of the calendar year will most likely become announced in early 2025. So that's typically how we do things.
In regards to deadlines, to a question, did the original deadline of 6/30 for the first round get moved?
It did, mainly because of we were delayed in putting together this planning assistance, and we wanted to make sure that the Mass Energy Insight portal was operational. So that's why we pushed it out almost another month.
Next question, can you apply for roadmap planning assistance if you have not yet passed the specialized code?
Absolutely.
And how will you be as likely to get the planning assistance if you haven't passed the specialized code?
You most likely will get it, but you may not be in the first group. It depends on how many, you know, how many applications we get.
Yep, and how close you are to, you know, if it's on the warrant for town meetings this summer or not at all, that would determine it as well.
Right, it'd be helpful information, you know, if it's, you know, going to be, you know, voted on this spring, but you know, it's after April 12th, or most likely be on the fall town meeting. It's a glimmer in the eye, or, you know, it'd be helpful to have that information.
How complicated is the application since there is a short time frame?
It's pretty simple. Let's see. So we need a letter from your select board chair, city council, mayor, town manager, whoever is appropriate to write these letters, that the community intends to meet the requirements within 1 year. By the way, you know, this is, you know, if you don't meet it in 1 year, but it's 15 months, it's okay. You know, I think the idea is that we want communities to apply for this assistance who are serious about moving forward. That's sort of the goal of that letter. Secondly, we want, you know, if you have an energy committee, sustainability committee, or a partnership with a community organization, we want documentation of that. We want this screenshot from Mass Energy Insight. And then checking off these types of things in the application, identifying, you know, how far along are you? And that's it. And then, yeah, and then start preparing. But we don't require this as part of the application.
Next question. It sounds like the Climate Leader PON will be issued separately from the Competitive Green Communities PON. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it's, you know, we're gonna call it something different. So it's, you know, very separate. We're calling it the Climate Leader Accelerator Grant. So it'll be a separate grant, separate timeline, separate rules. It'll be yeah. So it's not part of that particular part of the grants, or not part of the competitive grant.
That can a community apply to a Climate Leaders PON if there's an active competitive green communities grant?
We haven't fully developed the grant program yet, so I don't want to misstate something or say something that we end up changing. So we're not sure.
This question from Shelley Dean. With the Climate Leaders 2022 baseline, what happens with excluded properties, like properties acquired since the GC baseline? Are properties...
Sorry, go ahead.
Properties excluded from the GC baseline included in the 2022 Climate Leaders baseline?
Yes, so all of those properties and buildings that were not part of your green communities baseline because they were either built after your baseline year or acquired after the baseline year, that all goes away. There's no exclude from baseline option with Climate Leaders because all emissions are emissions. So things are a little different. So we're not doing that. We're not doing building stock changes. Trying to keep it a little simple. Trying to keep it a little simpler.
Can we work on roadmap and climate action plan in parallel paths, or do you recommend that the roadmap be completed ahead of the climate action?
Well, that's not for me to say. So if the community has bandwidth to do both at the same time, more power to you. Again, a climate action plan is not required to become a climate leader community, but a roadmap is. So I think if you need to, prioritize your community or volunteer workload, take that into consideration.
And is who will be responsible for ensuring that Eversource energy supply and infrastructure will keep up with increasing demand as more and more communities become climate leaders? Is it municipalities ourselves, or is it DOER including the objective in your plan?
That's a great question. Obviously, municipalities, don't have a say over what Eversource or National Grid do with their infrastructure, but there is the start of the electric sector modernization plans that the investor-owned utilities filed fairly recently, and they're going through review with I believe the DPU. And these are plans to, essentially plan for the electrification of heating and advanced electric vehicles and things like that. So that's going on now. And again, I think similar to, solar, I do know there is some pinch points with parts of the electric distribution and transmission system. And those have been identified and they're going to work on those. But yeah, we're all doing, marching in the same direction. Hopefully, we'll meet there at the same time.
I'll drop a link to the ESMP's
Thank you, Mark.
Site in there as well. It's if you want to read some 700-800 page documents, they're pretty in-depth. All right, next question. What does adoption of a climate action plan mean? Once the town committee had written it, who needs to adopt it formally? Our climate resolution adopted at town meeting required the writing of a climate action plan, and it has been written. So do we need another step?
All right. Which question first? So in terms of the climate action plan, I think what you're referring to is the decarbonization commitment. That's what I think what you're referring to. And there's a number of ways that a community can meet that. One of them is to have, I know a number of town meetings or city councils have over the years adopted a resolution, trying to achieve net zero or similar such things. That's what that's referring to. But also an option if for some, we're trying to be flexible here. So if a community has a climate action plan, the fact that it developed this plan and it's been accepted, like the it's been submitted and the select board or city council or the mayor says, you know, we have this climate action plan, we're going to start implementing it. There's, you know, et cetera, you know, that's what that is. Mark, were there other questions in there that I didn't answer?
I don't think so. I would recommend working with your regional coordinator.
Yes.
Also, just to maybe give them the information and the documents you have to see if they already need it or if there's additional steps you need to take. Next question, what will be the frequency of the grant cycle for Climate Leaders Awards? Will it be annual?
The accelerator grant, most likely be annual because they're going to be big grants and complicated. And as ambitious as we are, our staff is not growing.
Will the Climate Leader Accelerator Grant also help cover costs to mitigate barriers to decarbonization, specifically deferred maintenance?
Oh, deferred maintenance versus electric panel upgrade. Not sure. Not sure.
Yeah, that's something I think we have to think about.
Yeah.
The accelerator grant would be additional funding available on top of the competitive grant? Question mark? Yes. Has the roadmap grant application been posted yet?
Yes. It's been posted. It was posted on Combis, I believe, last week. And Mark, if you don't mind, putting the link to it in the chat or wherever you're putting it, that'd be great. And if not, reach out to your regional coordinator. They'll be happy to send them along.
It was in our newsletter too, right? Last week.
So.
Next question, if we apply for the first round and are denied, do we need a second application for the next round?
I don't anticipate, you know, denying applications. Again, depending on how many we get, you may, you know, not be in the first tier of communities being served, but we're not going to deny you and make you reapply. We'll just say, we'll get to you, but it'll be a couple of months.
All right, next question. What will, oh, next. Do we need a town resolution passed to create a municipal decarbonization?
No, but there needs to be some sort of commitment from the municipality, and we identified whether it's a resolution or a climate action plan, or there's a group of mayors and town managers within Metro Boston that are part of the MAPC Metro Mayors Climate Coalition that have made a commitment that will suffice for those particular communities. But there needs to be some sort of commitment that the community, the municipality is all in on trying to achieve these goals.
I think a lot of those things are up to your town too, and how your town procedures work and what should be brought to them.
Yeah.
The community need to attach a roadmap as part of the application.
The application for climate leader certification, yes. That's one of the requirements, but not for the planning assistance. The planning assistance is to help develop that roadmap.
What information is required for documenting kitchen equipment in the roadmap? Is it just commercial equipment like in the schools, or small fridge and microwaves in the department buildings? What we're looking for with the kitchen equipment is specifically anything that's using fossil fuels. The idea is to remove fossil fuels from the building. So we're not looking at, you know, we don't want to know what kind of mixer you use in the kitchen. We really want to identify what's using fossil fuels. For communities that have received the maximum $500,000 Green Community Grant and are under a 2-year moratorium for additional competitive grants, will this be waived if the community is designated a climate leader?
That's a good question. That's something we will take a look at as we put together the Climate Leader Grant.
If a commitment to eliminate on-site fossil fuel use by 2050 is in a climate action plan that is currently in draft form, could this still count towards criteria number 3 for the roadmap TA assistance? So if it hasn't been passed, I think they're asking.
Yeah, so I think, we're looking at, oops, this one, yeah. Yeah, check that off and explain where the community is in the process and some sort of timeline.
This is for the climate leaders application process, but and apologize if this was already covered, but is this pass fail, or if there are certain things missing, will you work with us to get to compliance?
And we're talking about the certification overall?
I guess so, maybe for either the grant or the certification.
Right. So for the grant, it's not a pass fail. It's, are you going to be in the first group or the second group, or if there's, a third group, how we determine, again, it's determined on how many applications we get. And in terms of certification, hopefully you work closely with your regional coordinator to make sure that what you put together meets the requirements. Unlike the energy reduction plan, those of you that have been through the Green Communities process fairly recently, we did spend a lot of time on making sure that there was some, like a documented 15 or 20% reduction in your energy reduction plan. That's not the case with this, because again, these are targeted emissions goals. And this is a roadmap towards reducing the use of fossil fuels. So if the roadmap doesn't, at the end of the day, based on your roadmap, and we see that by 2050, half your buildings are still using oil, that might be a fail, but I don't think that's going to happen. This is more of a planning process, and I like to call it a working document, because things will change over time, and you may need to update it over time, and as new buildings come online, or things fail sooner. But again, this is a planning process using what's in your building stock and what the future capital and facilities plans are for your community.
Final question, they're asking if there are a clarification question. Are there 2 commitments required for the roadmap application? One to be fossil fuel free by 2050, and one to apply to climate leaders within a year or so?
Well, that's a good question. So yeah, so the commitment, the letter from the chief elected officer or chief administrative officer, that's committing to, yes, we plan to apply to be a climate leader in the next year. And the other commitment is, does the municipality have a decarbonization commitment or a commitment to reduce or eliminate fossil fuels by 2050? So yeah, those are 2 separate commitments. One is, yes, we're on board, we plan to become a climate leader. And the other is, yes, our community has voted or has affirmed that this is a goal that we will all strive for.
That was the last question. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, those are great questions. If you have any further questions related to the grant application itself, please use the a wonderful Q&A system on Combise. Or if you're not able to get on Combis, relay it to your regional coordinator and we'll get an answer for you and post it on Combis. And if you don't know your regional coordinators, or here they are, they're more than willing to work with you and answer any additional questions as well. I want to thank you all for joining and for your excellent questions. And with that, I will let you go.